Hi everyone, and welcome to the Firehouse stream. We are celebrating Mental Health Awareness Month for the month of May, and we are starting with a mental health panel discussion. My name is Maya Hill, and I am the executive assistant here at the Firehouse stream. And I'm really excited for this conversation just because I have many important people here, and we really just want to share our stories and make mental health normalized in our community. So I'll start with Tracy. Can you explain why you're here, how you're affiliated with the Firehouse Stream?
Hi guys, my name is Tracy Wilson. I'm a past mentee here at the Firehouse Stream. I'm very excited to be here because I'm learning to be very open with sharing my story with people in hopes of inspiring or perhaps maybe pulling someone out of a situation that was similar to my own. So I'm very grateful to be here to have the platform to share this with you guys.
Mm-hmm. And you're also a aspiring business owner?
Yes, I'm aspiring business owner, hand painted denim, with a variety of other things that I'm planning to do with that. So I'm very excited to have this opportunity to kind of like connect everything and weave everything together.
Excited to have you here too.
Thank you.
Marquan, why are you affiliated with the Firehouse Stream, and also what are you thinking to get out of this conversation?
Yes, my name is Marquan Jones. I am a Firehouse Dream community member. I grew up in Maywood and attended, the schools here, Irving Elementary School before it was a middle school, and I went to Proviso Math and Science Academy, and I was just really galvanized by Jasmine when I met her in the beginning of the pandemic, and we did food drives, and she was just telling me about her vision for the Firehouse, and it was when she first started, and I was just like really excited because I hadn't really seen an initiative like that in Proviso, so I just wanted to get involved, and yeah, I came to do a workshop, and then she talked to me about the mental health panel, and I just really wanted to come and share my story so that I can, again, like Tracy said, to help other people who are going through similar situations.
I love that. What was your workshop here with the Firehouse?
Yeah, so along the lines of kind of this conversation, but I wanted to kind of showcase how to cope with mental health and have healthy coping mechanisms through art, and specifically spoken word poetry or written poetry. So I kind of showcased some of my favorite spoken word poets, and then I also shared some of my poetry, and then had the participants, which Tracy was a participant to kind of write. So yeah, it was a really good workshop.
Yeah. And Jasmine, the creator of it all. So what do you do here at the Firehouse? And can you kind of share like why mental health is such an important part of the Firehouse?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Jasmine Lopez, the co-founder, executive director of the Firehouse Dream, but first I am a community member of Maywood. I see myself as a community member first before I am an ED, which helps inform my decision making now that I'm leading an organization. But all that to say, I'm a creative, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I have 3 kids, and my mental health journey started about 5 years ago, and my hope was just to continue to normalize the topic and conversation of mental health. And one of the ways that at the time I didn't realize that was really mental health, but I'm a storyteller. So I used photography and blog writing to highlight and feature stories all the way back from 2011. But it wasn't until about 5 years ago where I started implementing the strategies and realizing that it was time to focus on my own healing and my own opportunity to tell my story. And so it's a big pillar of what we do here at the Firehouse Stream, because I just believe we need to just continue to normalize the topic and make it feel safe, make it feel like something that it's okay to talk about feeling sad and our feelings, and just walking through what does that mean, what does that look like, and then how do we get help when we're ready for it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think what I'm most excited to be here about, I think my journey started with the suicides that happened in Proviso East. My really good friend actually was one of them. So I I've always thought of mental health as really important, but after that, I definitely wanted to become an advocate. So that's also why I'm here, and also why I really believe that, especially in this community, that mental health should be normalized and talked about. So I do want to get started and actually ask Jasmine first, because you kind of talked a little bit about how your journey started, but if you could walk us through, maybe through looking goggles or through a different perspective about you looking inwards, how does your story start, and where does that journey take you?
Yeah, so I think in my childhood, I grew up in a single parent home. My mom had to work multiple jobs, which just left me vulnerable to experiencing things a little girl shouldn't have experienced. But the memories, I didn't have them until my adulthood.
Yeah.
And so I didn't realize how much my lived experience was impacting me until I turned 30, and my daughter turned the age of where my greatest memories were. And I was being triggered, if I'm honest, by her, and I didn't know it. And I was like, why am I responding towards her? Because she looks so much like me. And so I saw this 9-year-old Jasmine that was wounded, that was hurt, that was really sad. And I needed to learn how to connect with her. And for me, I was like, I need to figure out how to heal, process, gain language, cope through what I had experienced, so that I can be the best mom that I can be to my girls. And so that is really what made me realize, a wake-up call, that I needed to start my own mental health journey and start talking with a therapist and really unpacking the pieces of my story of abandonment and how that really impacted and was impacting my relationships. It was impacting how I saw myself. It impacted my belief system, everything. And it was transformative. And now looking back, I wish I had started my mental health journey much sooner.
Yeah, Dakota definitely looks like Jasmine for the people that don't know. But yeah, and it's really nice seeing you, especially in the Firehouse, sharing that journey with us and making sure that it's okay to be not good today. So I'd like to ask Tracy, so what about your story is different, and how does that impact your mental health journey?
Well, from first glance, mental health as a topic is such a strange situation for men in society. I feel like men are often pushed towards a stereotype where their bodies and their minds are used as weapons. They're really only allowed to feel negative emotions that put them above other men. They're not allowed to show vulnerability. They're not allowed to show that they're sad or they can't do things, because that isn't what a man is supposed to do in our society. So growing up, it was really difficult for me to do that when the people around me, the men that I did have in my life, never preached anything to me aside from just suck it up, walk it off, do this, do that. So I gained this really hard exterior to myself when I was a child. And, I let my aggression out in ways like sports and things like that. But there was a loneliness to it. There was an emptiness to it where it's like, all right, I did this, but like, now what? I can play this game, I can do this sport, I can do this, but I still have to go home with myself at the end of the day. And it was learning to be alone with myself and learning how to process my thoughts and how my relationships with my family and things like that affected me. Growing up in a single parent home, a lot like yourself, being the middle child of 7 children, all of which were some of which are older, and having favoritism on me as a child, kind of placed against me, always feeling like I was fighting some type of battle or trying to win a game. That's the way that I always felt with my mental health journey. But something that I always like to imagine myself doing as a child was always getting out of situations. I used to, I found coping mechanisms early with ways to deal with my things, and they weren't healthy mechanisms, but they were like, all right, well, there's someone in this world going through something worse than you, so like you guys can't both be sad. Like you have to find someone that you need to help, and you have to find someone that you can inspire right away. That was what I was looking at as a kid, and even let's say as a young adult, I'm still dealing with a lot of that kind of that outlook on life. But my mental health journey has just started this year, actually, and a lot like yourself, I imagine. Some of the memories that I had, I didn't know I had them until like 6 months ago, and kind of unpacking all these things. I shared in the video. I think I shared with you guys. Having memories of yourself, crying yourself to sleep on the floor because the water's turned off and there's nothing to drink in the house, or, walking into your mom's bedroom and seeing her pass out on the bed with a syringe in her arm and things like that. they're difficult experiences people to go through, you know, and you know, but the culture I grew up in, and the family I grew up in, it was always, well, like, you got problems, I got problems too. So like, you know, how can, you know, so like, you're not special, you're not this, you're not that. And you know, the biggest takeaway from people like yourself and like the Firehouse Dream that I've noticed is like, it's okay to not be okay, and your problems are just as valid as everyone else's is. And that's kind of where my journey has led me today. I'm learning that it's okay to be upset, it's okay to have those days, but you know, no matter how far you run, you always carry yourself with you. So it's important to learn how to be with that person and to be a better person.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that you guys both shared, like, we don't really realize what we've been to until we get there. And it's hard because then it's like everything floods in at once, you know? And it's really hard because then you kind of start from nowhere.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you guys sharing that as well.
Thank you.
Marquan, can you share a little bit about your story and how you use spoken word and poetry and fashion and all that to maybe use it as a way to identify with yourself?
Yeah, identify with myself. That's an interesting way to phrase it. Yeah, so I would say that poetry is my first creative medium. Like Tracy, I played sports my entire life, and just hearing you speak, like, it really resonated with me because as a man, like, I've had similar experiences, but I played basketball. Pretty much that was my first sport until my sophomore year in high school at Proviso East, and I kind of didn't really feel like it was good for me anymore because a lot of favoritism, but my dad was really great at basketball growing up, so I kind of, in a way, like, wanted to appease him, but I also really enjoyed it, but then I realized, like, I could never be as good as he was, so that was kind of something that I had to come to terms with. And then I did track and I played football, but in the 7th grade, I had a class assignment. There was, we were reading poetry, but honestly, it was a bunch of old dead white guys that I didn't really like resonate with. So, you know, the Shakespeares of the world and all of these things. And I'm like, okay, like, this is cool. Like, they write in a way that's also old English. So like, it's not how we speak today. And, but then we saw this documentary and it was called Louder Than a Bomb. And it's essentially, I think it's the Young Chicago Authors now. They rebranded, but they used to have high school competitions where they would have spoken word poetry teams. And yeah, then they would go compete all the high schools, and then they would go do a national competition. And of course, these are all like BIPOC like folks, so I like felt seen. And then we had to write our own poem, and I first started out writing a letter to my future self, or writing a letter to my future kids, or to my parents. And at first it didn't rhyme. And then my teacher really emphasized that it didn't have to, like, our conception of what poetry was, it didn't have to be that way. Like, I didn't have to write an iambic pentameter or ABAB rhyme scheme. Like, I could just be vulnerable and authentic. And then I submitted the assignment and I thought it was trash. I'm like, this is so bad. But my teacher read it and she was like, this is really good. And I think that's something that is important, especially as a young person or a kid, is to be affirmed, because I think a lot of people that I know who don't consider themselves creative, usually there's a point in your life where you decided that, or someone decided that for you. So to be affirmed early on really helped me to be the creative I am today. And I kind of use fashion as well in that way. I went to the same schools as you guys. I went to Irvin Elementary School, had to wear uniform our entire life. Went to PMSA, wore uniform I think 3 out of the 4 years. So I never really developed my sense of style. And then it was also like groupthink too, because back in the early 2010s, everyone was wearing Aeropostale, like Abercrombie, you know, Hollister and all these things, or you had some True Religion jeans and a Gucci belt. Like that was, that was like the fashion. And I'm like, okay, like everyone was obsessed with designer, and sometimes it could, you know, that was kind of a status symbol, but it wasn't really style. And I realized that when I got to college, I went to Cornell University in upstate New York, and everyone that was in my friend group were from New York City. which is like the mecca of fashion in like the United States, and they all had a very clear aesthetic, and they are all very confident in how they dressed, and then I kind of envied that. So that's kind of how I developed my style and got into a fashion magazine on campus, and then I graduated in 2020, December 2019, and then obviously the pandemic hit and things like that, so it was kind of weird because we were all in sweatpants, and I just pretty much wore that. But yeah, that's kind of like what my mediums are, like poetry and fashion, and I kind of blend them together too. Like my Instagram handle is Dapper Griot, and my mentor, Brandon Alexander, formerly known as Real Talk, he considers himself a griot, which is a West African poet or storyteller. So back in the villages, they used to have folks who have people sit around in a circle, like similar to this, and they would read poetry or stories or, things from the past. And then the dapper part is like my fashion. So I might style an outfit and write a poem about the outfit. So I kind of do things like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I also really appreciate you sharing like how you kind of use those things as an outlet. And I feel like a lot of us kind of need that, and a way to express ourselves, but also being aware of how it comes off to people and how you express your identity. So I really appreciate you sharing that as well. But I do appreciate also how all you guys were really vulnerable with your stories. I definitely have a problem with being vulnerable. It takes me a really long time to open up to people. I'm definitely an introvert, and I want to ask you guys, and also hopefully the audience can understand this. How do you guys become okay with being vulnerable? And I'd like to start with you, Marquan. Like, how do you make sure that while maybe you have questions about your identity, but how do you become vulnerable in that state, and also with your mental health journey and sharing that with us?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, something that Tracy said earlier, it really resonated with me because it's the same mindset that I am trying to overcome. And you kind of had this coping mechanism where you said that, oh, it could be worse, or someone has it worse than me. And something that I learned in college is that there is no hierarchy of oppression. Like, I could get a paper cut, or you can get, punched, but at the end of the day, we're both in pain, and our pain is different, but your pain is your pain, so you can own that. And, I found this, found myself having this toxic positivity where like I would say like it could be worse, like at least like I have a family, at least like my friends love me, but then like not really coming to terms with my trauma or with the things that were negatively impacting me.
Right. Yeah.
And that's something like I've been going to therapy coming up on 2 years in July. So I would say my mental health journey started 2 years ago, which is right at the beginning of the pandemic, which was a lot.
Couldn't have been a better time.
Yeah, honestly. And Jasmine, you said that earlier, like, you wish you started your journey earlier, but like, I feel like there's no better time than like now. And it's like everything happens for a reason. And it's kind of like, I could have been a different person if I would have started later or sooner, like you don't know. So I think that's how I learned to be more vulnerable, because I think another word that I think is synonymous with vulnerability is authenticity. And me being my authentic self, dressing the way I want to dress, like getting my nails painted, like people can see that if you're comfortable with yourself, then they're more comfortable around you. And then I just realized that like I had a lot of people-pleasing tendencies. And I was always pouring from an empty cup, like trying to kind of appease other people, and it was just tiring. And I would be there for people in my life, and then when it's time for me to need that help, nobody was there. So then I realized, like you said, like no matter how far you run, like you have to take yourself with you. So that's kind of how I've learned to cope and be vulnerable, because it's more so for me, not for other people.
And also, like you said, like comparing yourself to where you could have been. And also, I'd like to point out how comparing your journeys to other people is very common, especially for me. Like, I often compare myself to you or you because you guys are extroverted and you guys are okay with vulnerability, while I'm learning that that's something that I have to work on. So it's hard for us to see where you guys are at, and also how do we get there, but also be okay with not comparing ourselves. So, yeah, Tracy, like you shared before about your journey, how did you become okay with sharing that and being vulnerable and authentic in that?
So that was a strange journey for me. It was one that I had to find myself in a situation where I wasn't trying to force myself to do more than I could. I'd look up to like really famous people like like Conor McGregor and all that, and I liked the gravitas and the like that their personalities had, and I was like, man, like I really want to be like that. And I saw how unafraid they were to be them, and to they could like talk the world up, but whether anyone believed it or not, like that was who they were. And growing up, I was like, that's how I want to be. Like I really want to be like that, but I had to condition myself to understand that there are times where situations are different. I'm not like my friend. I'm not like friend A. I'm not like friend B. I'm not like friend C. I have to be who I am, and I have to be present for myself, and so I can be present for the people around me that I care about. And being okay with being vulnerable for me, that like I just shared, was strange, but it was also really sobering to me. It was a situation to where, like Marquan said, pouring out of an empty cup. It was like, how many people can I please before I'm happy with myself? Where does it stop? Where does this me being everyone? When do I stop being who everyone needs me to be, and when do I start being who I need me to be? The person that I need to wake up to, because I'm the person who I wake up to in the morning. Like I look in the mirror at myself. So it's really tempting for me. At times, and it was at times, to create like alternate versions of myself to fit people's needs, because like growing up in a household like you did, everyone had issues, and I was aware of that. But as a child, and especially the middle child, I had to find a way to not get washed away and all that. So what I did was I became someone who could serve their problems rather than go against them, make another opposition for them. So I became a people pleaser. Is what I did, because I never really understood. I was like, I have all these things that I'm good at. I have all these things people tell me I'm good at, but it never really feels like anyone cares. And I had to learn how to know that the right people will be okay with you not being vulnerable with them. The right people won't make you feel like you have to tell an authentic version of yourself to them. And it's not so much in becoming the right person for someone else, but becoming the right person for yourself.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And also sharing that sometimes you do make up those alternate versions of yourself, but it's just, like you said, a coping mechanism. Jasmine, how do you share your story with us as mentees and staff in the Firehouse and be okay with sharing that authentic version with yourself? Do you ever get scared or nervous? Or
Absolutely. I think when I think about vulnerability, I really resonated with what Marquan was saying about how vulnerability is not about them, but it's about us. And so what does it mean to show up authentically? To bring your full self to the table and to say, like, here I am. Accept me at the fullness of who I am. And so that's who I try to be in every conversation, in every space. But that didn't come natural, and that didn't come easy, because there was a period of time, for a long time, where I assimilated. And I thought that I had to deny myself, my cultural identity, my experience, in order to attain this version of success. And when I got there, I was like, wait, this doesn't look anything like me. This doesn't represent who I am. I had separated all of these pieces of who I am into different accounts and different spaces, and it just felt so inauthentic. And I was confronted with, well, what are you gonna do about it? And I had to just journey along with it. I did a blog post about 6-7 years ago called "My Name is Jasmine and I'm a Lopez," because for a long time in my business, I did not include my last name because I did not want to be judged on my art, my creativity based on my cultural identity. Because there's this assumption, right, in Latino culture that our services are cheap. If you're looking to hire someone, you hire a Latino to do that, right? And so I assimilated for so long that was like my first opportunity to be vulnerable about my own struggles with my cultural identity, with my experiences in the wedding industry as a photographer, my experiences with clients. And for a long time, I thought I was making it up in my own head, that I was experiencing this alone. And it wasn't until I shared that blog post where so many other creatives were like, oh my gosh, me too. And there's this power when we share our stories, when we're vulnerable. It creates space for us to realize that we're not alone in our experiences, that what we experience can be experienced through togetherness, through community, through closeness, right? And we want to be careful that we're not like trauma bonding either, right? Can we talk about that? But in our vulnerability, as long as we're remaining being authentic, right? And then based on the audience and who we're talking to, we have to be wise in what we share, how much we share, those details. And we have to keep ourselves in check as well, that we're not oversharing or sharing too many of these details for this idea of something to be accepted, because that could lead towards trauma bonding. But all that to say, for me, I needed to know that I wasn't alone in the experiences that I was experiencing, and I was okay with being the first in sharing those experiences. And now years later, I host photo shoots and public events with other Latinas who share their experience and their stories, and we get to talk about the pressures of what success looks like and how do we approach that, and maybe even dismantle and challenge it, and then identify what does it look like to build something that's authentically connected and rooted to who we are, and what does that look like to live out of that daily. And the Firehouse dream for me is an extension of that. My hope is that we're getting to partner with you guys, the next generation of creatives, to be able to say, you don't have to assimilate. You don't have to change who you are. You can bring your authentic self to the table from the beginning, and we want to partner with you in that, and we want to help you learn through what we've gone through so that you're not having to make those mistakes that we're making, that we made a decade or 15 years ago, right? And so that's why authenticity and vulnerability is so important to me, because I'm like, I want to see this next generation of creatives not only thrive, but create this amazing content. And it's happening, right? It's happening all over. So we're not doing anything new, but it's this idea of like, instead of doing it alone or isolated, what does it look like to do it together?
Yeah, and I definitely think that, like you said, there's so much that we can get into, but also I definitely look up to you because you share like anything that you're going through on your story, and I think it's so cool, and I really do appreciate you guys sharing these tips on how to be vulnerable, because I know if I go through it, so many people go through it. So thank you guys for sharing that. But I do want to talk about some proud moments of your guys' journey, instead of, we can't be in the depths of our stories, but we also want to communicate how there's joy and light coming from that. So can I ask you, Tracy, like you said, you've been through a lot of family struggles and identity struggles. What is a proud moment that you've had through that journey?
I think I'd have to say it happened recently, like earlier this week, that I've kind of it was a really proud and really profound moment in my journey there. It's really difficult to live in a family that kind of like is marred by mental illness, marred by alcohol, drug abuse, things like that, and like these become who they are. So you have to ask yourself, like, am I really different? Like, what if I'm just like them, but, I have this complex to myself where I think I'm not, how do I separate myself as far as I can from these problems? How do I get help? How do I do all these things? And I kind of sat there and I had to ask myself in my journey, like, what are you looking for? What do you want? I find myself that when I explain my goals to people, I more explain like really abstract, non-tangible things. I want happiness, I want freedom, but what is that like? How do I touch that? And so it's difficult for someone or even myself sometimes to grasp that idea. And I kind of sat down with myself and I was like, well, what do you want out of this? And I like to think about life as like a mountain. You know, you're always going forward. You know, sometimes you can fall back down, but you're always going up. You know, that's the way you want to go. And it's in me getting to the top of that mountain, no, not so that people can see that I did, but so I can see everything else. It was in me noticing that I never wanted an easier life. I never wanted, you know, a more accepting life. I just wanted a more comfortable life. I wanted to live more comfortable with myself. I was fine with having issues, you know, I was fine with that. I wouldn't have wished these things on anyone, but sometimes it was difficult for me to ask, like, why me? You know, like, why did I have to be the kid that didn't have a mom and a dad? Like, why did I have to be a kid that kind of dealt with these things? Why do I have to be the one that feels like, you know, siblings kind of leave me out to dry, hang out to dry all the time? Like, why do I have to be the one like needle in that haystack that kind of is like I'm the one person in a group of people trying to help people, but like everyone else wants to take, you know? And just to sit there with myself and be like, you're not like that. You know, I give you space to admit that these are problems that your family has had, but like, you're not them. You know, you know, sure, they've tried therapy, they've tried this, but like, you haven't tried that. You're different. You know, your story isn't done being written yet. And it's never too late to turn the page back, you know, and like, you know, erase some things, you know, like, it's always about that. And a lot, like Maya said, you know, like definitely seeing you share your story and things like that on social media, that was unheard of to me. You know, like being on social media, I feel like so many people give you unwanted advice. You know, they're giving you, oh, be positive about this, be that. But like situations aren't always like that. You know, like there are times where like you can't feel comfortable in a bathing suit, or you can't feel comfortable posting pictures of your face and things like that without heavy filters and all that. But it's not for anyone to take that away from you. You know, you have to, if that's an issue you want to work through, you know, you have to be given the space to work there on your own pace. And social media itself is such a vulnerable aspect of people's lives. And like growing up in like the generation that I have, it's huge, it's bigger than ever. So to see like you like share your story on Facebook and things like that, like I was like, that's a bravery that like I don't even think I can, like, you know, I can't hold a candle to that right now. But it's inspiring to see that someone else is there. And like that, I'm like, and you almost get this vision where you're like, I want to be like that. I want to do that. Like I want to get to the point where I can be authentic. I can not only show my wins on social media like everybody does, but I can also show the days where I'm losing a little bit more. And just understanding that, you know, I do these things for me, not for other people. And so that was the most proud moment I think I've kind of experienced in my mental health journey thus far.
Yeah, that's really cool. I also feel like for me too, a moment of proudness is actually just taking the steps to get in therapy. And even though like I still don't even know the depths of my trauma, like even taking that step to just become a better person and a person that I can be proud of is really important to me, and I'm definitely grateful that I took that step. Jasmine, can you share a little bit about a moment of proud and gratitude and in your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I think about what does it look like to normalize the topic of mental health, and how did I feel safe enough to finally get the help? And to touch a little bit on what you were sharing, like I knew I wanted help, and maybe it was like a 6 months process before I felt ready to getting a phone number, to making that first point of contact, to actually scheduling that first session. And then like week 3, I was like, I think this is not a good fit. And what's cool is she called me out on it, and she's like, so where does that leave you and me? And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, and so she was aware that because I had learned how to disassociate from myself for so long as a way to self-protect, she knew that I was doing that with her. And she called me out on it, and she held me accountable. And I was like, okay, maybe I'm not supposed to be done with this yet. And I continued on with her. So that's a proud moment for me. But another moment, and specifically in normalizing it in my home context as a family of 5, to know that there's 3 of us who are in therapy, individual therapy, doing our own work is amazing. We recently had ice cream the other day, and my middle child, who's about to be 10, was listening in on a conversation about, we all just had therapy that week. And she's like, see, this is why I need a therapist. And it was just That was such a proud moment for me, for my kids, that we are writing a new legacy, a new story in our family context, that this is okay, that this is normal, that there is nothing wrong with it, that is actually a sign of health, and that I have my children who want to safely engage in what this looks like. To me is a moment that made me so proud, especially as a mom.
I love that. And it's really like, even though I'm not a mom, but it's definitely really rewarding to see it through you. Marquan, what do you think your proud moment might be?
Yeah, proud moment. As it relates to mental health, yeah, just being like vulnerable, like I think my proud moment, going through anything like mental health related, whether it's like depression, etc. Like it's kind of coming out of that and climbing out of that dark hole and that dark space. Because then me sharing my story with people have reached out to me and saying like, wow, like that was so vulnerable. Like, thank you for sharing that. Like one person's like, yeah, I was really in a dark place and you like kind of like saved my life. And I was like, wow, just me being me, like it wasn't something intentional or anything like that. I was just like, again, doing it for myself. But if tangentially, like other people are, kind of lifted up and empowered to do the same for themselves, like that's something that's very important to me. And yeah, like pretty much with my mental health journey, I pretty much got diagnosed with bipolar type 1 disorder in February 8th of 2020. And yeah, just going from, being a Division I football player and being super, like I've always been considered gifted. Like I was in APOP in middle school where, accelerated pullout program. Then I got accepted to PMSA. So it's like all these different things. And then I went to an Ivy League school. So like I've always been high performing, but maybe there are some signs early on that like, mental health is something that's not talked about in the Black community. And I graduated. I went from having structure, like spending 30 hours a week playing football, whether it's practices, watching film, like working out, games, and then, having a campus job. Like I spent 10 hours a week, like because like I wanted to have some extra money. And then on top of that, like 20 credit hours of classes, like crazy. So I actually graduated a semester early. So I was originally class of 2020, but I graduated December 2019. And then I go from that and it's like nothing. Like what do I do now? Like I have no structure, like I'm retired from football. So I was just like really going in on all my creative things. And then I was kind of like just spiraling. And then ended up and actually I got like committed to like a mental institution, and it was just kind of like showing signs. Like I was sleeping like 3 hours a day, not really just super creative. And yeah, it's just kind of something that I went to inpatient, and I was there for 7 days or 6 days. And it was just really like, one, I felt like really betrayed because I felt like I didn't need to be there. Like I definitely needed to be there. But like when I got there, like pretty much I had tonsil issues in high school and out throughout college. And my parents kind of like, my friend called my parents because like, I wasn't acting like myself. Like she saw it very clearly, like this is not like you. Called my parents and they pretty much finessed me to get me to the hospital. It's like, yeah, we got an appointment for your tonsils. And then I show up and, I put on a little gurney, with your butt out, and you put me in the bed and I'm just chilling. I'm like, bet. But then I was just like, yeah, like I was just really upset for some reason. And I was like kind of rude to the nurses. And at this point, like, this is what I come to know is like mania, where it's like very like grandiose thoughts. Think Kanye West, like I'm gonna be president type thing. You feel like you're on top of the world, you feel invincible. And then I was there just like really energetic. You speak really fast. It's kind of like word vomit. And it's not always like, it's just a stream of consciousness and it doesn't make sense all the time. But you feel super creative and pretty much was rude to the nurses. They called the security guard and like, not in my right state of mind, I already don't really like the police. And the security guards look like police, so then I like flip my shit, and then they like put me to sleep. And then I woke up in a mental institution and I was like, why am I here? And they diagnosed me and I was like, no way. Like, you know, cause the stigma, like, I'm like, no, I'm not crazy, like whatever. And yeah, I was there. And then after that I had to do outpatient and it was up north. I was the only Black person, actually not the only, it was a Black woman, but she was a therapist, but she was an outpatient. Like therapists are the hardest like people to take therapy because like they know all the frameworks, they know all the skills. So she was sharing her story, but I couldn't relate because she was so far ahead of her mental health journey. And then everyone else was like wealthy white people from the north side. So I'm sitting here talking about my trauma and again, no hierarchy of oppression, but like some people were there like eating disorders and you know, things like that, which is like their journey. But like in a way I kind of felt jaded because I'm like, wow, like you have an eating disorder and I live in a food desert. Like it was like I found myself rationalizing it, and then like, I'm talking about like traumatic things like losing friends to gun violence at an early age, like, you know, watching someone like, you know, die in front of me, things like that, like that I didn't feel comfortable sharing because like I felt like their trauma, which is valid, but it just didn't, I don't know, it felt like the tip of the iceberg compared to mine. So I knew I needed to leave there. And then I got my therapist now, her name is Ebony. She's a Black woman, because I knew I needed someone that I didn't have to explain too much. She would just get it. So that's kind of what I went through with that. And yeah, at first, like, you know, I was kind of afraid to tell people that I got diagnosed because the stigma is like, oh yeah, you're crazy. And people use it like colloquially, like, oh yeah, you so bipolar. And I'm guilty of it too. Like I used to do that as a kid, like, oh, you tweaking, like you bipolar, like whatever. And then to actually be diagnosed as that, it's like a whole different thing. It's an actual like mental challenge. And then seeing the extremes, right? Like a Kanye West, like I can imagine being a billionaire and a celebrity and being in the public eye. He can't go to the grocery store. So like, and without people knowing that's him. So my challenges are different, but like I understand, you know, I can tell when he's off his meds and he does it because like your medication can make you feel less creative. So like he might go off his meds to make an album or things like that. And then he has a lot of yes men in his circle. So I watched the Kanye documentary recently. I can see some of the signs. I'm like, damn, like I sounded like that. And then just sharing my story, like it's a stigma, and you know, like I think some people that are close to me were like telling me, yeah, don't tell anyone and things like that. And I was like, no, like, because the opposite side of that is the depression. So like these two polar opposites, like feeling invincible and then in like the deep depths of like depression. Like I felt like a zombie. I was telling you guys at the workshop, like I remember distinctly, like we did that march outside. I think it was from Broadview all the way to Forest Park. That was the first time I had been outside in like weeks. I was sleeping like 16 hours a day. And then I also came here once and I was sitting on the couch and the medication that I had was too strong for me at the time. And I just felt like I went from being depressed to feeling nothing at all, like just numb. And I'm usually really extroverted, but like, I just didn't feel myself. And then coming out of that and then finding the right medication that worked for me, like I switched from like antipsychotic to like a mood stabilizer. And then it was better for me and I felt like, wow, this is what I actually should feel like. But the side effect of that was I gained 60 pounds in like 2 months. And then went through a lot of body dysmorphia. How do I go from this fit D1 football player that was 200 pounds, like really fit, to like 245 pounds and like from July to like September of 2020. And I'm like, wow. And then it really made me sad because I'm into fashion and I wore sweatpants all year and I put on my clothes, like my old clothes, and I couldn't fit anything. So I'm like, wow, like I can't even be into fashion anymore. Like, you know, so that was like me sharing these parts of my journey with people and being authentic on social media or writing poetry about mental illness. People have reached out to me and it was like, wow, like I'm also, you know, bipolar. I also got diagnosed with anxiety, depression, etc. And then you realize that like everyone has mental health, but 1 in 4 people have a mental illness. So it's very common, but people don't talk about it. So that's why like I wanted to tell my story because I know what it feels like to feel like you're alone. When I first got diagnosed, I'm like, I'm the only one in the world. And then sharing my story, I realized that that's not the case. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really amazing story, and I'm really thankful that you shared that for us because it changed my perspective just even now, not about you, but just about like mental health in general. That journey was really impressive. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Our next question is a little bit different as well, but like you were talking about how you felt alone and like how you felt alone with your family. And also for the audience, this is great advice for anyone. How would you want a friend to act towards you when you're going through your mental health journey, when you're going through the depths of it? Tracy, if you want to start about how you would want a friend to act towards you.
Right. So a lot of my friends that even I currently still have aren't exactly, I wouldn't call them friends per se, but like they're not exactly constructive to my mental health anymore. Elementary school, middle school, high school, I was definitely, anyone who knew me knew that I had a lot of people around me and I was physically very, very, very together with everyone, but emotionally I was very alone. It was really difficult to kind of separate that for me. It was like, well, like, how do I have all these people around me telling me they love me, telling me this, but like, I don't know what this feels like still. Like, it was almost like people told me these things because they had to, or they felt like a friend should do that. But it never felt real. And I kind of had to sit back and I was like, well, like, how do these people, like, how do they serve me? You know, like, even, I'm in the process of getting rid of some of the male friends I've had, misogynistic, homophobic, kind of really just not good people to be around when you're in a journey like myself. So, just to have a friend to be accepting, to not even just understand, but to listen and to be to be aware. Like, you're not going to understand everything I'm going through, and I don't need you to understand everything I'm going through. But what I do need you to do is I do need for you to account for those feelings for me when I'm in a situation like that. Marquan was talking about painting nails and all that. I have done that before. I would like to paint my nails without my like guy friends like saying, "Oh, like that's gay," that kind of stuff like that doesn't do anything for me, And it was my friends had such an impact on who I was and what I did to where I'd start talking a different way. I'd start acting a different way because I had to be the tough guy. I had to be that, but not everything's a fight, and I'm learning that, like I said, like my body can be used for more than just fighting, and for more than just being a weapon, for more than just being an instrument of violence or anger or any of those negative emotions. It's okay to be happy and like things that aren't the same as your friends, even if they don't like that. It's okay to do that kind of stuff. And so to answer the question, how to be a friend to someone like myself, it's to approach you with patience. Like I'm someone as a creative myself, I'm always fine tuning things. My mind is like a piece of metal. I'm always sharpening it. I'm always going back at the drawing board, figuring out different approaches to my life. All that because I'm constantly someone who's consistently obsessed with innovation for myself and to innovate the different institutions and things that I bled into. To approach me with a patience for that, to understand that like I don't always have everything figured out, but like I'm on the way, to approach the world with curiosity with me, not being someone who is so centered and having everything figured out all the time, but more so being okay with asking questions that don't have answers, like approaching the world with a curiosity with like, well, let's see what this looks like together. Let's see like, how does this might look for you? How does this look for me? How can we how can we collaborate with that? And, to approach with an acceptance, yeah, your life is different than mine. You have problems, I have problems. We're both working through them. We're not on a time schedule and we're not the same. There can be two truths. You can be a little farther than I am and I can be a little slower than you are, but we can still be friends. We don't have to be, it's not so like you're on a different level than me. So like you're better than me or I'm worse than you or I'm better than you. It's to be able to accept and understand differences and to be open-minded to change and not only just to change, but to be open-minded and willing to accept pain and be there for yourself as well as me, and to understand that, as men, as women, as people, as humans, we're allowed to feel those things. And to give our friendship air to breathe and to feel that kind of love there would be how I would say how someone can be a friend to me.
Yeah. Even when my friend passed away, I often thought why couldn't I be there for her, Or maybe if I talked to her this day, maybe I could have prevented that from happening. But you can't be a savior for somebody, even though you might want to, solve their problems. But I can't do that, and I can't do that for everyone. But I do sometimes want to make sure that I approach people with that same mindset, because even though they may be struggling, they might not tell me that. So I do sometimes think about how I could have been a better friend, but also I can't really blame myself. So, Marquan, when you were saying that your friend actually called your parents, how did that make you feel, or how could we be a better friend for someone not in your situation, but more how can we be a friend of somebody when we see them struggling?
Yeah, I think you kind of spoke to it earlier, right? At the end of the day, it's their personal journey, and the only thing you can do is be an ally and support. But at the end of it, when you see the signs, you can, don't be combative, because a person that may not be aware that they need help, or maybe they're reluctant to seek help, it could kind of derail them or make them go off the deep end. So you have to just really approach the situation with grace, and also to make them feel heard. And just honestly, just ask them what they need. Because I think we are prescriptive as friends sometimes, always giving unwanted and unwarranted advice.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like Tracy said, you don't know what they're going through. Even if me and you had similar concepts, similar things that we're going through, your journey is still your journey and my journey is my journey. So I would say, if there's any resources that you know of or anything like that, but sometimes people don't need advice, they just need you to listen. And I think that's the most important thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, Jasmine as well. How would we make somebody heard, in your opinion?
Yeah. Well, I think about my own journey. So about 3.5 years ago, I was officially diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and I had my depressive state was about 6 months, and I remember just having friends and family reach out and say, how can I support you, or how can I help you through this? And there were times where I needed that, but there were also times where the decision making, when for me personally, when I'm depressed or I'm going through an episode, making more decisions is actually harder for me. Mm-hmm. And so just having you show up and just having you be present with me speaks volumes, as opposed to saying, if you need anything, I'm here, right?
Yeah.
No, I'm not gonna do that. Mm-hmm. And I can't, because I don't have the capacity to right now. I'm not in the state of mind to do that right now. But there were moments where I couldn't do anything. I was just in bed all day. I would cry all day. I'd give myself a goal or a task to do, if it was completing one email or editing pictures. And there were moments where my husband would just grab me by my face and look deeply into my eyes and say, we are going to get through this. It is okay. And just a couple months ago, I had another episode. It didn't last as long. It was just a couple months. But and that was a fear from 3.5 years ago, where we're what if this happens again? What if this is more common? What if my episodes happen more back to back? Thankfully and gratefully, they haven't been. But a couple months ago, again, it was just really, really complex. And I know what the signs are now. Yeah. And so I had to go to the people that I trust and say, I am depressed again. I went to my therapist and was like, this is what I'm going through. I'm not against medication. I believe medication is an option. So I went to my doctor 3.5 years ago, and we talked through our options. And even her, I mean, she's amazing. She helped me feel safe about it, because I think when we talk about medication, especially in BIPOC communities, that's like medication, like, oh no, you don't do that. And I'm also a person of faith, so that adds in another layer of complexity where it's like, oh, you're not trusting in God enough if you need to be on medication. And so there was a lot I had to like delineate between like, no, I am like close to wanting to no longer be here. I need to do something. And so my doctor helped me feel safe in making the decision. And I always thought too with medication, specifically to my diagnosis, that medication had to be a forever thing. I thought it was like something like, once you're on it, it's forever. And she helped me to realize, no, it can just be a season. It can be 6 months as you're learning and growing with your therapist, up your therapy sessions. And so I had talked about a natural supplement that I had learned about called St. John's worts, and I had talked to her about it. And she's like, I have patients who do one or the other. She's like, you're not at a point where you can't do nothing though. So she's like, I'm giving you 3 days to decide what you're gonna do, if you're gonna go the prescription route, if you're gonna go the supplement route, but you have to get started on it right away. And after, thinking deeper about it, I did choose to go the supplement route. I did have results, it did help me big time, and it made a huge impact in helping me feel a lot better. While I was increasing my therapy sessions. So all that to say, like, in terms of like how people made me feel safe in the midst of my own mental illness journey has just been showing up, texting me, hey, thinking of you, how, here's some encouragement for today, or I brought you lunch, or grabbing me by the face like my husband did and said, I'm here with you, you're gonna get through this. And so I think fixing is a natural thing we try to do as a society, and when we're in our journeys, fixing is not what we need. We just need present people who are okay with saying, I don't know what helping looks like, but I want to be a good friend. How can I help? So being curious, right? So going back to that curiosity and saying, I may not have that same lived experience you do, but I love you enough, I care enough about you to learn how to do this together with you.
Exactly
and I think that's what it's about.
Yes, exactly that.
Yeah.
Oh, I had a very specific example about a good friend, and it relates to Jasmine, honestly. And in the beginning of the pandemic, like, I was very anxious and I started to have panic attacks, and I was looking for coping mechanisms, and Jasmine actually introduced me to essential oils. Like, my mom would braid my hair and she would use like tea tree oil for my scalp, but like to actually have like lavender and all of these different concoctions, like Jasmine, I got a box, like kind of like a goodie box from her, and then I had like the diffuser in my room. So like that really helped a lot in the beginning of the pandemic, and I definitely need to get back into it. But and then one of my friends who has panic attacks taught me some useful like things to do when you have a panic attack, like putting ice in your mouth, because it grounds you, so it like shocks you and brings you back to reality. Or on the back of their neck, if one of your friends is having a panic attack, you can do that. Also, the box breathing method. So you think of a square and you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, and hold it for 4 seconds. And what that does is like lower your heart rate, because like a panic attack, you're like boom, 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 like heart beating out of your chest. And then the last one that I liked is like the 5 senses. So you say one thing you see, one thing you can touch, one thing you hear, etc. And then that again grounds you and brings you back. But I just thought about that because I'm like, wow, Jasmine was a good friend, and that's a clear.
I totally forgot about that.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you for that, and
Yeah,
that's something that I really appreciated.
Yeah, no, to share another example that kind of relates to Jasmine as well about my experience here as a mentee when I was at the Firehouse Dream. Jasmine is a mental health encyclopedia. She knows a lot of different terms and phrases for how to deal with things, and there were a lot of them, but the one that was really profound to me was the word agency. And I thought about that when she was saying that, like, like she shared an example of someone who kind of forced her to share something more than she was willing to. And she kind of felt like she was forced to. But after kind of reflecting on that, she understood, like, I didn't have to do that. And I'm no longer going to do that. So, when you're with friends and you're with, whatever, like you would talk about you being gifted, like photography for you, things for you. Like, there are people who be like, oh, well, like, you photograph things, you do fashion, you do this, you do that. Like, what do you have to be upset about? You're a Division I football player. What is wrong with you? Like, why are you sad? But it's not just being sad, like it isn't that. And to be able to communicate with my friends, like, yeah, like, hey, like, you might not understand that, but I still do have the agency and the right to own this. And, like, it's not your responsibility nor your right to take that away from me. And kind of just learning to be with people and around people who aren't so much trying to take your pain away, and not adding to it, but more so just being there for you when you need them to. Like you said, being present for you. Sometimes it's difficult to fold laundry or get up and take a shower when you're upset like that. Sometimes it's difficult even getting out of bed. So, like, for someone to make the effort, and for the one person, because at the time, like, it's really difficult for you to see people who are there for you. So for someone to bring you lunch, or for someone to text you a really meaningful text, or for someone to come see you and, just be there, not even doing anything particular, but just to be around you, like, it means a lot, like, hey, like, you still want to be around me right now, like, even though I'm feeling like this is something you still want to do. And it just helps friends can, in that way, like, friends can help you not feel so alone in your situations, like, while I can't relate to you, I can feel for you. And, like, just allow me to be here and allow me to do that. So I wanted to definitely share that.
Yeah. What about you? Like, this entire conversation we're having on this question makes me think about love languages.
Yeah.
And you talked about, like, folding the laundry for you, or calling you and saying, like, you look good today, like words of affirmation, acts of service, like, especially when I'm depressed, but just in general, being a good friend. Like, I kind of wanted to know, like, everyone's question to answer to that, like love languages and what you prefer to receive, and also what you're good at giving, because it might not be the same.
Yeah. Well, I am definitely a fixer. I don't know how, I'm learning how to, but, like, when someone comes to me with a problem, I'm like, okay, let's do this now. And that's not what people need at that time. Like, even with Tracy, like, I want to fix his problems just because I love him so much, but that's not what he needs at the moment. And even with friends, like, my friend came to me the other day and she was like, yeah, I'm like pre-diabetic. Like, I don't know how to go through that. And I was like, okay, can you go to the doctor? Like, can we get new food habits? But that's not what people need, and unfortunately, my love language is fixing people's problems, and I am working through that. That's not possible. I can't fix you, and I can't fix you, and I can't fix you. But I can be around you to make you more comfortable in these circumstances. So I think I'm on the other end, and that's why I asked this question, because I want to be a friend towards people, but also, since I am a fixer, I don't know how to be that sometimes. So just hearing your guys' words and how even the simplest things of just being around that person is really important. So I think even with that circumstance of my friend passing away, like I said, if I could have just been around her, maybe she would have appreciated that, but I wasn't, and that's okay, because, although I regret it, it's not like I can't go back in time. Yeah. So, but I do want to, like, close kind of with why you're telling us this, if that makes sense. Like, why is your story important to share with me and share with the audience and share in general, especially as we're becoming more aware of how our mental health is important to share within our community? So if you would like to share first.
Yeah, quite frankly, I don't think my story is unique. And I think, there are more people with my story and with similar stories to us. I even studied sociology, so, like, psychology is, like, more individual, but, like, sociology is like, you know, we all,
The
Yeah.
collective.
the collective, like,
Yeah.
you know, it's a very particular experience growing up in Maywood, Illinois, growing up in Proviso, growing up with a single parent household, growing up with two parents, like, but it all shares like this collective experience. You going through District 209 or District 89 or living, like growing up in the inner city across the United States, like there will be similar stories to ours. And I think the difference is only some of us are willing to express it and to share it. So I think that's why, for me, it's important to say it, because some people won't say it, but everyone needs to hear it. You know?
Yeah, I agree. What about you, Tracy? Why do you?
I think I would agree with what Marquan said. I don't think my story is different or unique than most people, but I do think my take on it is. I do think what I have to offer of this is, you know, what I'm learning is that it's okay to be good at things. Like, it's okay to be, like, you know, smart. It's okay to be athletic. It's okay to be these things. But you know, when all these things happen to yourself, like in my situation, well, yeah, like I did read a lot more better than people at my grade level, but that's because, like, I didn't have anything to do. You know, reading was my escape from my trauma. So that's what I did. You know, that's why I was that. So to have teachers like, oh, you're such a great reader and everything, it comes back where it's like, well, like, I didn't want to be, you know, I had to do that. Or, you know, like, oh, you know, you were so good at that. Like, how did you learn how to do that? And, you know, you kind of just sit there and you kind of give them like an answer, but you're like, oh, you know, I really learned to do that because it was either that or like I went home to see like my mom doing drugs. So like that's why I was out in the street doing that. So I got good at that, doing that. And it's to accept those gifts that you learn through trauma. And, you know, you to understand that, like, you know, things happen for a reason. And for you, and to not disassociate and to not dislike what you've learned from those situations, but to be grateful that you went through them for you to become the person that you are today. You know, like I said before, like I never wanted an easier life, just more comfortable one. But I'm thankful for the experiences that I've been through, bad or good, because it helped me become someone who I'm proud of being, who, like, I'm going to be someone who can be the person that I needed when I was 7 or 8 or 9, you know, years old, that kind of person like that. And like I said before, you know, like there comes a point in your life where you have to wonder, like, who's living it? You know, is it you? Is it a character? Do you feel like the main character in your life, or are you a side character in your own life? You know, how do you feel? You know, are you connected with yourself? Do you feel like you're yourself when you go through things like, you know, people like us have? You know, you disassociate a lot. You feel almost like someone else went through it. You were looking from an outside point of view, because to take yourself emotionally and physically out of those situations helps you. It feels better. So for me to be there and be able to allow myself to feel those things and to come to such a really, like, almost like I'd say, like, I'm not anywhere close to finishing it yet, but to come to almost a full circle understanding of how life has worked for me, and to be able to just say these things out loud and be like, wow, like that was a really crazy thing that I went through. And, like, you know, it's not any, just because like someone may have went through something worse or similar doesn't mean that mine is any less important. And so to that, like, my experiences are important, and for that reason my story is important. And that's been the learning process for me.
Yeah, I do want to ask you, Jasmine, also, why is your story important? But, like, why still tell us this? Even today, and with the Firehouse, and you share every mentorship, you know, with 10 different people along with staff. Like, why do you keep telling us, you know?
Yeah, so many reasons. One, I want to see our communities thriving. And I think how our lived experiences and the way that we grew up impacts how we see ourselves and how we see the world. And so if we can partner with our mentees in a way where they can start to unpack that a little bit, or we can just plant the seed. Maybe they don't unpack it here, but they do that in 5-10 years. I believe that it can lead them towards a greater, deeper sense of purpose and meaning and healing. And I want to see us thrive. I want to see our communities thrive. And I believe in the power of our stories. We all have a story to tell. And there is beauty in our stories when we can share and exchange it. I feel like it's indigenous to our cultures. It's culturally who we are, and it's been ripped away and stolen from us in a way where it has been lost. And so I'm curious to see, what does it look like to collectively come together and share our stories in the way that we are now? It grounds us, it brings us back to our ancestors, it acknowledges the beauty of storytelling and what it represents and what it's all about, and the healing and the shift and the trajectories of our lives can be different as a result, and in turn create new legacies and new future generations that are more interconnected and healed and ready for something new.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
I love that.
If you guys have anything that you guys want to share relating to how Jasmine just said, like how we can be more proactive in, you know, sharing our stories and making sure mental health is normalized in our community as we close out.
I just like to say, like, you know, coming fresh off a mentorship experience with this place and things of that sort, I definitely could sense, you know, people were in like my future self was in a position where it's like, you know, you hear yourself narrating, you know, you're like, you need to get through this so you can be the person that you're gonna be. You know, you can't be the person you used to be, present me, you need to be me so I can meet you later on. And you know, I did notice in my mentorship that there were some mentees who were a little farther along than I was in some situations, a little not as close as I was in situations. But something that I really appreciated about this place in general, like, just full disclosure, I had no idea this place is exactly what it turned out to be. I didn't know that it had such an emphasis on mental health. And when I started coming here, and I almost felt like when I was coming here, I was kind of stepping into like that future self me shoes. That's when I noticed, I was like, yeah, like this place is doing something like profound for the people who come through these doors. And it was really poetic to me in a way to think like this is ran out of a firehouse. You know, like there are people who used to house here and put out fires, and that's exactly what this place is doing for us. And it was really great seeing that happen. And just to have a presence in the community like this, especially one like Maywood, is incredible. You know, like I've never really considered myself someone who's been too connected to community because like I wasn't connected to myself for a long time. But you know, now since I've been gaining a better sense of individuality and things like that, I have become more culturally in tune to more community based and things like that. And just to hear Jasmine's dreams and aspirations for the Firehouse, I got like secondhand euphoria for her. Like that was incredible. Like, you know, I'm not a Maywood resident, I'm not, but like I still feel for this place because that's how strong this place that's how much of a foundation this place has built for me with community, even one that isn't my own. And I just strongly encourage people to seek those kind of people in their life and to find those things that mean a lot to you, so then you can carry them on to the next generation and you can continue to be people that move this world forward rather than bringing it back.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Any closing remarks about, you know, being a part of this community that mental health isn't always talked about?
Yeah, I guess I realized, am I about to quote J. Cole right now? But he said it's like, there's no such thing as a life that's better than yours. And we always have this grass is greener on the other side. But I quickly realized, like, you know, when I was in high school, I'm like, I can't wait to go to college. When I was in college, I can't wait to get a job. Now I have a job and I realize it's like, it's the pursuit of happiness, you know? Like, it's not a destination you arrive at. It starts within you. Because you're always, you know, I want to make $1 million. Like, if that's your goal, then what once you get that, you know? So it's like, I just want to be authentically myself, and then that brings me serenity and that brings me peace. And I hope that my energy can also help other people to, you know, become more at peace with themselves.
Yeah, I love that. I would say just take one baby step, whether it's journaling your story for the first time, whether it's sharing it with a trusted person in your life for the first time, whether it's learning how to do some breathing exercises through YouTube, right? Like breathe in, breathe out. And so my encouragement would just be to take one baby step that leads you towards being a more healthy, mentally connected person to yourself, and to live out of that authentically.
Yeah. Shameless plug though, we are having a breathwork workshop, so if you want to learn, come to the Firehouse. But yeah, I definitely appreciate what we do here, and that's why I'm such a big mental health advocate, because I want more people to realize that, like, although you may not know how far your mental health goes, it's important to take the first step, because like you guys said, you inspired so many different people just because you shared one thing about your day. So yeah.
Drink some water and do skincare.
Yeah.
Also that's always.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm so glad you guys have come today and shared your journey with the audience and with me. We really appreciate you guys taking your time, to just help realize that other people are going through the same thing, and it might be different hearing it from you. So we do want to also plug in that we do have other workshops besides just a mental health panel. We have aromatherapy and breath work, like you said, those essential oils. We have a mindfulness workshop about what you guys were talking about. So all that can be found on our website, and it's just a click link where you can register. So yeah, I really appreciate everyone watching this video. It was really important to me to facilitate this conversation, because that's not what I, usually do. But yeah, I really appreciate everyone that has been here and helping us with this mental health intensive. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.